They said theirs was the one love Hollywood couldn't break. 19 years, 2 daughters, countless red carpets, and for almost 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban looked untouchable, like a story written by fate, not fame. But behind the glow of the spotlight was a secret far more human. A love story that began as salvation and quietly ended as surrender. It started in the mid-2000s, when Nicole had already lived a lifetime in public. She was the woman who'd stood beside one of the most powerful men in Hollywood and walked away from him with her dignity intact. An Oscar-winning actress, fragile and fearless all at once. And then came Keith, the country musician with fire in his veins, still wrestling with the ghosts of addiction and self-doubt. They met in Los Angeles, and something about their energy didn't fit the usual Hollywood rhythm. He wasn't polished. She wasn't pretending. And in that contrast, something beautiful sparked. June 25th, 2006. Sydney's Cardinal Soretti Chapel shimmered in candlelight as Nicole walked down the aisle in an ivory gown that seemed made of light itself. Keith waited for her at the altar, eyes wet, hands trembling. The tabloids called it a fairy tale, but real love stories are never that simple. Because just 4 months later, the fairy tale cracked. Keith checked into rehab for alcohol and cocaine addiction, a secret he'd kept even from her. To the world, it was a scandal. To Nicole, it was a choice. Leave or love through the storm. She chose love. Every few days, she flew from Los Angeles to Tennessee, writing him letters instead of ultimatums. And while the world whispered about humiliation, Nicole stayed silent, because some people fight for love quietly. When Keith emerged sober, he called her his miracle. And for a time, that's exactly what she was. But miracles come with a cost. By 2008, their first daughter, Sunday Rose, was born. 2 years later, Faith Margaret followed. The press called it redemption. The fans called it hope. But inside their Nashville home, it was quieter than anyone knew. Keith poured his guilt and gratitude into music. Each song became both an apology and a love letter. Nicole, in every interview, spoke of forgiveness more than love, as if even then, she understood what they were holding together wasn't weightless anymore. Love, after all, can turn heavy when it becomes a rescue mission. He was the storm. She was the calm. And though they danced in that imbalance beautifully, the rhythm couldn't last forever. Because when one person is always saving, and the other is always being saved, sooner or later, even gratitude starts to ache. Still, they built something rare in an industry addicted to endings. From the outside, they were unbreakable, attending premieres hand in hand, red carpets sparkling with laughter and charm. Inside, they were holding on with quiet courage, patching cracks no camera could see. At the Country Music Awards in 2010, Keith took the stage, guitar in hand, and sang Without You, a song written for her. The crowd roared. Nicole cried. It looked like victory. But to them, it was a fragile truce, a song trying to hold back silence. And yet, silence always wins in the end. For the next few years, their careers soared. Nicole shone in Big Little Lies and Rabbit Hole. Keith filled arenas across continents. They were proof that love could survive distance, or so everyone thought, but distance doesn't always mean miles. Sometimes it's the quiet that grows between two people, even when they're sitting side by side. And by the late 2010s, that quiet had started to whisper something neither wanted to hear. They still smiled, still showed up, still said all the right things. But the rhythm that once connected them now felt rehearsed. And behind every laugh there was an echo of fatigue, of fear, of something ending slowly. No betrayal. No dramatic blowout. Just a slow fade, the kind you don't even notice until the lights go out completely, because that's the thing about love stories in Hollywood. The world only sees the sparkle, not the silence that follows. And for Nicole and Keith, the silence was about to get louder than any applause. By 2020, the world stopped, and for a brief moment, so did they. Lockdown forced everyone into stillness, even people who had spent decades living through airport gates and hotel rooms. For Nicole and Keith, that silence was both a gift and a mirror. In interviews that year, they called it healing time, a pause to reconnect. They cooked together, played old songs, rewatched their early films, and for a while it seemed to work. But peace has a cruel way of revealing what motion used to hide. Because when the noise fades, you start to hear what's really missing. They had spent years running from city to city, stage to stage, mistaking momentum for closeness. And when the stillness came, they finally saw the cracks that travel had been covering. Keith once said, "I realized how much she carries for us." He meant it as gratitude, but Nicole heard it as exhaustion. The kind that builds up when one person holds all the emotional weight, quietly, for too long. When the world opened again, they returned to work. But something in them had shifted. He went back on tour. She went back on set. And the distance this time didn't feel like routine. It felt like relief. By 2023, their public appearances had become rarer, more polished, less spontaneous. At the Academy Awards that year, they walked the red carpet like clockwork, radiant, synchronized, perfect. The crowd saw chemistry. Their friends saw choreography. Nicole's crimson gown shimmered under the flashbulbs. Keith kissed her hand. The world swooned. But somewhere between the cameras and the limo door, silence followed them home. Even that night, people close to them noticed something off, a kind of practiced laughter that didn't reach the eyes. They were still together, yes, but more like actors in a scene they'd played too many times. It wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the moment both realized the performance had become easier than the truth. Over the next 2 years, distance became habit. Nicole's filming schedules took her across continents: London, Morocco, Los Angeles. Keith toured over 40 American cities. They called it balance. But in truth, it was drift. By 2024, they had spent less than 2 months together all year, not because of anger, but inertia. It's strange how quietly love can fade when both people are too kind to fight about it. When Nicole's film A Family Affair premiered in 2024, the world noticed her again, not for the performance, but for her on-screen chemistry with her co-star. It was harmless, professional. But in a relationship already built on delicate peace, even perception can feel like betrayal. Then came June 2025, and a single interview that changed everything. Nicole was promoting A Family Affair when a reporter asked a lighthearted question. "How does Keith feel about those romantic scenes?" She smiled, that perfect practiced smile. "He's an artist. He understands." Hours later, Keith appeared on a live Zoom interview. When the same question came up, he laughed, then froze. Seconds later, he disconnected. 10 seconds of silence. But in Hollywood, silence is never just silence. Within hours, that clip went viral. Keith Urban walks out mid-interview. 10 million views. Endless speculation. It was the first public crack in their perfect image. From that moment, every headline became a countdown. Was it pride, distance, or something deeper? A wound that had never really healed since the early days of their marriage. By late summer, the whispers had become shouts. Reporters followed every movement, every ringless hand, every social post. Nicole avoided questions. Keith stopped mentioning her on tour. And then in September 2025, it happened quietly. Almost too quietly for a couple the world once worshipped. Nicole Kidman filed for divorce. 19 years of marriage reduced to paperwork and silence. No court battles, no blame. Just exhaustion, the kind that love alone can cause. Friends close to them weren't surprised. They'd seen it coming in real time, the long fade between two people who had survived everything except peace. Because peace, ironically, can be the hardest thing to share when you've built a love story around chaos. In the days after the news broke, fans mourned it like a public tragedy. But those who truly knew them said there was grace in their ending, the quiet understanding that sometimes holding on becomes the cruelest act of all. Nicole moved into a smaller home near their Nashville estate. Keith stayed behind with his guitars and his silence. There were no statements, no bitterness, no theatrics. Only two people finally giving each other permission to rest. Some called it sad. Others called it inevitable. But Nicole called it peace. The announcement came on a quiet Friday morning. No press conference, no social media meltdown, just a short statement released through their publicist. After almost 2 decades of love, life, and growth, we have chosen to part ways with deep respect and gratitude for the years we shared. It was polite, beautiful even. But between the lines, you could almost hear the sound of a door closing gently, one last time. For the first 24 hours, the world didn't know how to react. Was it another Hollywood publicity stunt? Or was it real this time? Then Nicole was spotted in Sydney, walking alone by the water. No ring, no entourage, just silence. And that's when it sank in. The fairy tale was over. News outlets exploded with timelines, sources close to the couple, and endless speculation about who left first. But what most people missed was this. They didn't end because of scandal. They ended because they outgrew the version of themselves that once made sense together. The first few weeks after the divorce were a strange mix of grief and grace. Fans expected drama, tears, betrayal, maybe a tell-all interview. But instead, both of them went quiet. Keith canceled a few shows, saying he wanted time to breathe. Nicole stayed off red carpets for the first time in decades. Those who knew her said she spent her mornings walking barefoot through her garden, sipping tea, just existing. No roles, no rehearsals, no pretending. For the first time since she was 14, Nicole Kidman wasn't performing. She was healing. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating into sadness, she started creating again. Differently this time. Her next project wasn't a glamorous blockbuster. It was a small, independent film about endings, about what it means to love someone enough to let them go. It wasn't hard to see the parallels. In one scene, her character says, "Sometimes love doesn't die. It just gets quiet enough to live somewhere else." When that line played in theaters, people cried, not because of the film, but because they knew exactly who she was talking about. Keith, meanwhile, returned to the stage months later. But something in his music had changed too. Gone were the upbeat anthems about wild hearts and neon skies. In their place were softer songs, about home, about time, about watching someone walk away without anger. At his first show back, he looked out at the crowd and said softly, "Sometimes the hardest part of love is not the goodbye. It's what you do with the quiet that follows." And then he played a new song. No one had heard it before. It didn't have a title. But when he sang the line, "You were my stillness when I didn't know how to stop," the audience fell completely silent. Online, the world split into 2 camps. Some said Nicole had left to find herself. Others said Keith had finally accepted the inevitable. But both of them, in their own quiet ways, were saying the same thing. That love doesn't always fail. Sometimes it simply finishes. It's hard to accept that in a culture obsessed with winning and keeping, but maybe the most powerful kind of love story is the one that ends before it turns bitter. By the end of 2025, life had moved on. The tabloids had found new couples, new scandals, new heartbreaks to chase. But for those who had followed their journey, from the dizzy joy of their wedding to the soft ache of their goodbye, it still lingered, because their story was never really about fame or failure. It was about 2 artists trying to make a forever in a world that moves too fast for forever to survive. In her first interview months later, Nicole said something that summed it all up better than any headline ever could. "We didn't fall out of love. We just stopped meeting each other in the middle." There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance, the kind that comes when you've finally made peace with your own story. She smiled, paused, and added softly, "I'll always be grateful for the years I was loved like that." And that's when people realized this wasn't a tragedy. It was a completion. Because maybe love isn't meant to last forever. Maybe it's meant to teach you something, reshape you, soften you, and then, when it's done its work, it lets you go. So when the cameras fade, the red carpets roll up, and the headlines move on, what remains isn't scandal or sorrow. It's the quiet knowledge that 2 people found each other in the chaos of Hollywood, and for nearly 20 years made something real. Not perfect. Not eternal, but real. And maybe that's enough. Some stories don't end. They just turn into memories.